gentlemen, please put your hands together as I welcome on stage architect Ricardo Bofill from Ricardo Bofill Jr, the Arquitectura, Barcelona, Spain.
Builders? One. Okay, we need more builders. Well, good morning, everybody. The lecture today, or the conference, or the speech, is supposed not to sort of showcase the work of my team, but to make us think a little bit about the cities of 2200. That's the sort of thing that I've been researching, and of course, it's all related to global weather change. So what would our cities look like in 180 years? What would they look like? I mean, would anybody sort of want to say what they would look like? Well, first of all, this is the poster, but it's a building that and it's going to be explained later on. Now, if we move forward, I want to show you first, who are we working for? We're working for the kids, we're working for the future generations, and we're working for the planet to make it sustainable and a sort of a planet where we can all live in a way. This summer has been extremely hot. I've seen the monsoons in Beijing, of course in Calcutta, in Goa, but also in Barcelona. They've ripped off a few trees from our studio. They made big disasters. So the sort of this tropicalization of the weather is only the beginning of a global warming. That hashtag Earth Alliance is Leonardo DiCaprio, very sophisticated way of providing money for the environment. And I just wanted to start with a little girl from Venezuela who doesn't know anything about what's going on. And I think that we've spoken about space, we've spoken about materiality, we were modern, then we were postmodern, then we were deconstructivists. And did that matter that much? I mean, did style matter that much? Or now we have to introduce a new parameter, which would be climate. The panel for global climate change is predicting a few things. First of all, that the cities will be affected, of course, by the amount of particles that we have in the air. So right now, this summer, we reached 411 in July. And if we, basically the low emission scenario means that we're going to get 445 by the end of the century, which means it will be hotter than this July. If we don't do anything, which is what it seems, because our politicians, both in the United States and elsewhere like Brazil, are basically not caring about it, and many people think Mother Nature's going to repair everything, or God's going to repair everything, or even the goddess Earth is going to repair everything. But if we don't do anything, we're going to have 1,142 particles in the air by the year 2100. So imagine 100 years later. This is the scenario. We built an artificial intelligence model with machine learning. It's of course very primitive, but it already indicates that the planet by 2040 is going to look pretty hot. And I'm worried about this, and I think it has an influence on architecture and on city design. So this year, we've had fires in not only in the Amazon, which got a lot of talk, but also look at Africa, look at Siberia, and look at the rest of the world. There were more than 100,000 fires, 72,000 only reported in the Amazon, so I imagine much more. So if we think about this, and we think, what are the oceans, right? The oceans have been alive for almost 4 billion years. 4 billion years. The oceans. The lungs of the planet are the oceans, they're not the forests. And we all come from those oceans. The oceans are mad, the earth is angry, and it's creating things like that, which went into the Bahamas and created a big disaster there. And what is it trying to do? What is the earth trying to do? It's trying to cool down. This is the only function of nature, cool down the earth. And it's interesting that in the last 500 million years, while the sun has increased the temperature by 30%, the energy I should say, the earth has maintained not only 21% oxygen in the atmosphere, stable, but also temperatures relatively stable within the ice ages. So what would a city look like if we are in 2200? So I've been talking to a few scientists, and they are also very worried. So what would happen to this Earth? What would happen to the Earth? Well, if cities in 2200, look, this is what they would look like. We would not be able to be outside. There would be no atmosphere. Why? Because most of the oxygen and the hydrogen would have separated. The gravity would not be able to pull down the hydrogen, and we would be living. So we don't need to worry about style anymore. We have sort of a station. This is, of course, a rendered, which is what we see in the movies. But I just wanted to bring it up because this is the Earth in 180 years. What can we do about it? Well, there's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence, robotics, and how machine learning can help us. And I think it's true, but can they solve the planet? Can they save the planet? Can they save this planet? Can artificial intelligence be a real game changer? Well, I think it's going to take a little bit more than that. We know that the rules of the game have changed with robotics, and that we have some help from the machines, but the machines itself are not going to be enough. So we're talking about this super algorithm that is going to help the Earth sort of through, for example, blockchain. Well, blockchain is one thing that we're using. We can also, use many ways to cool the Earth. I want to emphasize this thing about cooling the Earth. Geoengineering, this new word. Geo comes from geography. It comes from Gaia. It comes from the Earth goddess Gaia. And why do I talk about Gaia? This is James Lovelock. He just turned 100 years. I encourage you to read his books. They're called The Ages of Gaia, Gaia's Revenge. He just published a new book. And he talks about, he's a scientist, but he's also an engineer and an inventor. And he thinks that some modest geoengineering might help. But every time I talk about geoengineering, they say, well, that will take us to the next ice age. And what is geoengineering, right? We can put mirrors up in the sky. We can just basically put giant reflectors in orbit. We can put chemicals to save the ozone. We can have aerosols in the stratosphere. We can pump the oceans so that they don't remain sterile. We can also have sulfate particles blown out of planes. We can, move the oceans around. So essentially, there's all these ideas about geoengineering that I think architects, I just wanted to bring it up a little bit at the beginning so we understand that engineering of the Earth is something that we also must consider. And in India, we do it a little bit, of course. We have our own plants, we have our own sort of self-sustaining compounds, but that's not enough to capture the CO2 which is building up. And now I saw this article in CNN that says that we can refreeze the Arctic through a machine, right? But of course we can do that, but that ice is not going to have the millions of years and the millions of biodiversity that is required to absorb the energy. Now in geoengineering, we have all these people, religious, non-religious, it doesn't really matter, people that say that we're exposing the Earth through geoengineering. So there's no consensus, absolutely no consensus, and we're rapidly moving towards a situation which, as I was saying, the IPCC panel, look at that, where we're today and how it opens up. So nobody really knows what's going to happen, but that we're increasing the temperature of the Earth is something that we should all be aware of. And as architects, where we're now and where we're going to be is going to really affect our architecture, our cities. And I do hope sincerely that we don't get to that point where we have to build stations like in Mars. I don't want to scare you guys. I just want to create awareness, and I want to create consciousness. I want to help. I'm basically dedicating to architecture, but also I'm trying to help in this sort of efforts. Now, this is what happened to the Amazon this summer. It was a real disaster. It's very difficult for this forest to get back on track. Of course, there's many people talking about this. You've all seen this image of what would happen to Mumbai and what would happen to the cities which are which are on the coast. Well, Future Cities 200, and nobody knows what's going to happen because, of course, we have many models and we don't know what's going to happen. But what did we do? What did we do in the past? Well, there's one thing called Biome Emesis, which is looking at what other, let's call them animals, in this case they're insects, but other species in the earth. And it's very interesting how Sir James Lovelock speaks about these termite nests and how they have evolved for 500 million years. They have been stable. Now, let's think of cities as living organisms. If a city is a super organism, because it takes food, right? We bring food into the city, and we have waste coming out of the city. So in a way, it is a primitive superorganism. If we think of different cities connected together and talking to each other, maybe with artificial intelligence and a little bit of algorithms, master algorithms talking to each other, maybe we can make cities help global warming. If we think of a city as a forest producing oxygen as opposed to producing carbon dioxide, well, we could start thinking about this, and we all have to make an effort to make these steps. This is a project that we did 50 years ago. It was done by actually my father and the team there. And you can see a little bit how it is modular. What we tried to do is look at how insects live. This is a bee nest, how this modular sort of panel-like system actually can be introduced into architecture. So this is the sitting space that we did in Madrid. It's a system of cubes that become a community, that become an organism. we went from ideas and ideas of how to connect these cubes and how to actually go from one cube to the next, slowly sort of one module slowly becoming a city. Of course, this reminds us a little bit of Archigram in the 60s, how to combine the cubes, how to create a super organism, how to create something which could be, we need cities that have a small footprint. Why? Because we need to leave a lot of space for the earth, for Mother Earth, to actually do her job. And the job of Mother Earth is to sustain life and to cool down the planet. So the smaller the footprint, the better I think the city will be. Now, I don't know if it's Singapore, if it's Delhi, if it's Barcelona. I don't know what the model is, but this is some of the projects that we were trying to do with one simple module combined in space, and then introducing plants, introducing shops, introducing multifunctional, introducing the human scale, and finally seeing how these cities could actually, based on what the insects were doing, based on what our ideas of a city could be, and breaking away from Corbusier. Corbusier thought that the machine was going to solve all our problems. And now we know that machines are dead and that we have to be inspired by living things. This is Walden 7, which was the result of that combination of cubes. This is the section of the building. We have big sort of patios inside, so a lot of air cooling. Now we're in the 70s, right? We're still 40 years back, but I wanted you to sort of look at this. This is the plan of the same building. This is the units. You can have one module, you can have two modules, you can have four modules. They can be stacked in different ways. And this actually became a community. This is the first model. It is an old factory that we had there, and it was transformed into this. This building was built for 30 euros per square meter, so 3 euros per square foot. That was the time when you could do cantilevers, when you could do all sorts of crazy things, and the developers would not be on our, where they wouldn't, hammer our down. So this is the sort of inside with the blue courtyards, the colors of Gaudi, the colors of Barcelona, the sort of kilometer zero materials, working with what we had there, trying to create spaces inside the buildings. Of course, I don't have to say, but this is affordable housing, and it was quite a project in the way I see it. the streets are in the air, and the shops are in the air, and the people are in the air, but it creates a community of 500 families. Okay, well, this is the entrance, this is Walden. Now, what else did we do? Sort of to try to, sorry, one second, okay. So what else did we do in terms of creating this modular sort of architecture? We did this Kafka's Castle near Barcelona. It's an interesting way to, with one single cube combined in space, and by making a spiral with this cube, we managed to do this building, which actually has these very interesting sections, and is basically, again, something modular, where a simple 5x5 module sort of resolves most of the project. The models back then, which is kind of vintage, and I wanted to show you a little bit of this, and then the final sort of construction. This is, again, some of the projects that I think, without air conditioning, without any of the gimmicks that we have today, solve many of the problems that we might have. These compact cities where people are living together in a sort of modular way. This is Xanadu in Calpe. My colleague Ricardo, we're just talking about Valencia. This would be a little bit south from my colleague Ricardo, who's going to speak later on at 2:15, so I hope you're all here. Here's where we sort of try to imitate that rock behind. So again, the idea of Biome Emesis, the idea that we can copy nature or we can be inspired by nature, and then with the same cubes, this is a master plan, and with the same cubes we can create this sort of city in space. Ventilation is natural, everything is sort of happening in a way which makes a lot of sense in terms of what we're doing at the time. So this is what we call regional criticism of the modern Corbusian block. We're trying to break away from that slab that we all loved back when Chandigarh was done, but now this slab has been repeated all the way from Barcelona to Beijing, right? We're all kind of tired of these suburbs that continue to exploit the idea of the social housing or the affordable housing in slab form. This is Muralla Roja. It is basically just 50 apartments, again, just simply done with a cube that combines in space by creating this jagged sort of slabs, if you want, but making sure that you don't break away from your own rules. So you set up a set of rules, and then you go ahead and you combine these cubes in space until you have something which you like. You never have your final product, your final project in mind. You have a methodology which you try to make a different methodology every time, and then where the methodology takes you is where the project is going. I wanted to show you some of the use of pink in Spain with this project, use of blue, some of the colors that we find in India. You're very lucky to use colors because you know, it's something which is very cultural, and I think that's why now also Spanish architects like me have been invited to India, because there's a sort of relationship, cultural relationship. You're both in the south, you of Asia, us of Europe, and the British guys have been here for a long time doing their projects. So now let me show you what happens when all these ideas, all this, you know, sort of philosophy of architecture goes into the hands of developers. We have 80 people, right? We have 80 architects. They're all good. They all have families. We have to pay for their salaries, so we can't be totally idealistic in our application of our thoughts. We have to try to go from theory to practice. So the first thing we did when we came to India is say, what would happen with a country that is growing at 8%, now at 5%, with a population growing? So let's look at India and let's say, what would we do with this country? Well, first we said, and this was actually presented to the Prime Minister and to Niti Aayog and to Mr. Khan, saying 1 person, 1 tree per year, it says here, I would say per day. Let's replant the entire India. Let's look at population. Population is also inflammation. Inflammation in the sense that you get a lot of heat from this population that we have to house and that we have to build cities for, and that we cannot leave anybody behind. But look at Calcutta, look at how Bangladesh, It's up there. Now this is India today. We have destroyed a lot of the rainforest, a lot of the thorn forest in the center. So the first thing we said is we need to replant the entire coastal system with millions of trees, and that will prevent a lot of the storms from going inland. And then the center there near Hyderabad, we have the thorn forest. That is mostly gone. That is sort of also the lungs of India. So there was a lot of replanting, and of course now most projects have a lot of replanting. One person, one plant, one person, one tree. This was an idea to of course, the water doctrine, what to do and what to do with the waste. On the left is a project we did in Madrid. Left is the dump that they gave us. Right is what we did with the dump, right? So we engineered this dump to create a park. Of course, it has those little chimneys that you all know that burn methane. So we can do from, let's call it trash or waste. From waste, we can go to nature, you know, we can do it. So we need to clean our rivers, you know, we need to make our roads maybe out of concrete, maybe out of white concrete, so they actually, or green, right? So they actually reflect as opposed to absorb heat. So by connecting all the smart cities and all the cities of India into this sort of ecological sort of new system, we're proposing these sort of smart corridors which carry not only nature, so we don't fragment nature, because as you know, India is the most biodiverse country in the world. It has deserts, it has anacondas, it has, you know, it has from the tropical anaconda to the desert. It's incredible. And also culturally, you go to Chennai, you go to Kochi, you go to Calcutta, every city is actually completely different. So what to do? How to repair India? So what is what we call strategic planning. Sort of, I'm going from geoengineering to sort of strategic planning, how to make these freeways green. This is a project we did in France. How to make this high speed that we want to make for India. If we do about 10,500 kilometers, we could connect with sort of these smart corridors the whole country, and also animals and nature and bacteria, because remember, the earth is 4 billion years old, the oceans are 3 billion years old, but mankind is only 1 million years old, right? The steam engine, which was created by James Watt, was only 300 years old. And when we started working with the steam engine, we took that carbon from the earth, which had been put down there by Mother Earth, and we're putting it back into the atmosphere. This is the main problem, fossil fuels. Let me show you what we're trying to do with the smart cities. A little bit of planning here. This is south of Mumbai. Of course, we're trying to both capture the essence of Mumbai and then plant, use the water as a street, try to really sort of understand how these projects are about 10 years old. This is a project we did in Mysore. Again, trying to do mixed-use cities. But then what happens? The developer says, okay, south is the resi, north is the commercial. It's zoned like that. So what to do? How to implement these ideas of ecology into real architecture, how to use new materials, bio-concrete, how to really, and some of us will be dead or retired by the time that we find real solutions for this. Yes, we have all seen these kinds of projects, cutouts with plants. Does that help? I don't think so. You know what to do. Especially don't leave surfaces like this, open surfaces like this, very bad. I think 80% of the earth should be covered by trees. This is what we're learning in China. China is doing a lot of work with smart cities. But then we look at the projects that we're doing now, right? If we do an office block, well, it tends to be a glass box, right? But if we have a special building in the middle, why not try to do some sort of, in Milan, we have the vertical forest, so why not have the horizontal tropical forest? So we're trying to do a retail building, a commercial building with all this sort of planting. And what happens is then we have a retail consultant that comes like 2 years late and starts to mess up our sort of design. But Finally, it's about working in a team and trying to create buildings that actually are natural, functional, and also economic realities, right? Well, what could we do if we don't have the economy behind? So we have to go from an economy which is fuel-based to an economy which is based on nature. This is some of the examples of the work we're doing in India. We're trying also to bring back that sort of classical compositions that we inherited from postmodernism, the base, the middle, the top, you know, but is it ecological? Well, we're trying to make ecological buildings, but at the end, you know, a lot of them turn out to be boxes. This is a project that I competed with my colleague, Ricardo, who actually won. He did a better project than I did, but look at how we're trying to put some green, which is basically you have this is Thane in North Mumbai, the Sanjay Gandhi Park. We tried to do the silhouette of the park reflected in the buildings, but at the end the developer wouldn't buy it. So it's very, very difficult to get these ideas across. This is a project for Mr. Oberoi Realty with the jagged balconies and the super density. This is a project we're doing in Sector 57 in Gurgaon for Heinz and Conscient. Commercial projects where we're trying to bring, for example, pani, for example, water in the center. You know, so I wanted to go from the utopia to the reality, so I don't want to sort of be a spoiler. I want you guys to think about architecture in terms of how to bring water, how to bring nature, how to bring luxury, how to bring affordable, how to bring all these things that we all like. Now look at this one. This is PMAY. I wanted to bring it up because, of course, this is one of the biggest social housing initiatives that any country has taken. We have to build 30 million units by 2022, housing for all. And after a lot of experiments, we saw that going to some sort of classical language would be easier to make human scale than to go with the modern Corbusian or the modern or the sort of regional. So this was a proposal. Of course, we have only one panel. We can only have one panel, one aluminum scaffolding, or what do you call it? Aluminum system. So we only have one panel to make all this variation which we're trying to do. You know, so we only have paint at the end to do it. Now, this is my first project in India for Unitech, for Mr. Ajay Chandra, and then it was taken up by Google. It's a building which is based on basically the American office building, but it's clad in stone, and it's clad in the same stone that we have in the parliament. We looked at the Taj Mahal, we looked at your gardens. We think you have some beautiful architecture. We tried to sort of get inspired, but then reality, right? So what is the reality? You go from the dream to the reality. The reality is that developers are cutting corners, you know, and things don't look as good as you think they're going to. Now, Google says, okay, can you give us a logo? I'm like, a G? And they're like, yeah, the G. And I'm, okay, so let's look at Fibonacci, right? Fibonacci and the golden section and try to give it a few colors there. This is the render, and reality is coming up. Reality, here's reality, all right? So, I don't want to be a spoiler here, but it's difficult to translate those renders into something which is buildable. This is a new city we're doing in China. It's called Zhong Shi is the name of the president of China. The city is called Xiong'an. So I think it's a gift of the party or of the country to Mr. Xi. But anyway, it's a learning experience with the Chinese. Everything is sort of medium rise. Rivers are integrated, but rivers are artificial. So we have a sort of circular water system. So we have a very low water footprint. And of course, we have that 80% planting. So we have all these trees that we have to plant, we have to grow, and then we have to bring in. it's very interesting how you have to look at the local nature that you have there. This is the kidney of China. It's called the Bayan Lake. And we did some DNA research, also using some of the latest technology to bring back plants that were dead for 1,000 years, but that were still there. Sort of going through biotech and using some of the latest technology, trying to sort of make some architecture which is, in a way, I don't want to use the word ecological, because if you use engineered wood and you put a little bit of water and a couple of trees, you're ecological. No, you're not ecological. Ecological is when you have a zero footprint and when you produce oxygen as opposed to carbon. So I think that self-criticism is very, very important. This is when you work in China, you have to adapt to the Chinese sort of culture. When you work in India, the same. When you work in Spain, the same. So architects, somehow we are becoming a little bit regional. We have to do different architecture in different places. And if the world is heating up, will it all be sort of like tropical architecture in the future? Are we going to manage to move away from that horrible Mars station that is the prediction? Here, for example, we're doing like chimneys to clean the air. You know, our first experiments, our first sort of ways. This is our intercity station underground or covered by green, for example. The first approaches. Then the Chinese said, listen, we can't do a smart city. We can only do a smart town. A smart city is too big. No, so, but anyway, the principles of the smart city are ecology, and ecology, of course, includes water, includes clean air, includes waste, includes lots of chapters, but we call it ecology. That's principle number one. The second principle is mobility. Mobility is all about moving in an intelligent way. You've all heard about mobility. Also about creating pedestrian environments, human scale, all that. And the third principle is what I call socio-economic balance. So we have mixed-use cities. We have cities that have a combination of resi and commercial shops. Let's not do cities which are like in the past, and I want to criticize Mr. Corbusier again, by the way that he was planning the cities as one part is residential, one part is retail. I know it's easy to say and it's difficult to do, but this is what we're facing. I have 14 minutes left, and I don't want to bore you guys. I'm just going to invite you all to the factory. This is an example of 1975. You're given this. You're given this. What to do? Should we just bomb it? Should we destroy it? Should we have destroyed? What's the strategy to transform this into a neighborhood? Which is basically what we did. Basically what my father did. Basically what my team did. Okay, there were some landmarks. The chimney, 100 meters tall, beautiful. We're keeping it. Okay, we have some silos. We like them. We're keeping them. Okay, we have some interesting, but this is a cement factory, right? It's a factory that's creating cement. What can we do inside this factory to, instead of creating cement, create ideas that will make smart cities, right? What to do? What to do with all this jagged, all this sort of crazy, sort of 150-year-old factory of concrete, made out of concrete, a concrete jungle. So this is one approach. The approach was, in yellow you see what we decided to destroy, to actually bomb with using dynamite. We destroyed about 40% of it. And then we started looking at these silos and we started to connect them through platforms or through slabs, I would say, in the center. We did a project which is our own studio. This is a taller de Arquitectura. Of course, you're all invited, as I said before. And we used, again, the important element of plants. We worked with hand drawings. We introduced the first windows in 1975. Still Adolf Loos, who had said that crime and ornament are the same. And therefore, builders were very happy because no more ornament, right? Just blank walls, punched to windows, you know, and sort of like very modern, sort of machine-like looking architecture. And here we're introducing the arch came from our Catalan Barcelona experience, from Gaudi, of course, from all the architects that have learned so much from the masters of the past century. But see how sort of industrial architecture combines with historical elements or components, and then with the planting on the roofs and on the walls. So you can combine these very two extreme vocabularies of industrial architecture inherited from a factory which is making concrete with sort of simple materials and with ecology. Now this is some of the early drawings of this factory, and this is what happened now. This is our sort of showroom with some models we did. We did the Barcelona airport, which is on the left, some of the projects in Chicago, Paris, whatever. So what I'm saying is that without spending a lot of money, using nature, using space, and using materiality, we can go from this and this and this to something which slowly became this. So this project now with Instagram became a little bit more popular, but what I'm trying to say is that even the most ugly, the most difficult, the most industrial of sites can become something beautiful and something that we can live in. So let's hope that we don't get to that extreme weather where the globe is so hot that we have to live in stations, and we can transform our cities into sort of forests, into places using, let's forget about if we're modern, postmodern, regional, it doesn't matter what we are. What we need to do is cool down the planet, plant those walls with green, always using, of course, local botanics, local plants, local species, trying to bring in Barcelona, of course, I didn't say, but this is, of course, Barcelona. We have these beautiful sort of African palm trees, you know, bring them in and sort of plant everything. Now, for example, to do this parking lot or this parking place, we're using these industrial tubes. So no need to spend money doing columns. If you use a tube, which is normally a drainage tube, and you use it to make a planter, okay, well, there's, you know, you use a few rupees to make something good, you know. And I do believe that green is good and that we have to sort of help nature and make these cities compact. Some more views of the studio. I didn't want to bring the basically 1,000 projects that we have done in the last 50 years. I just wanted to bring a few. I wanted to challenge you guys with the thoughts of global weather change. I know you're all conscious, we're all sweating this summer, and I know that you're all already conscious, but I was speaking to people from the James Lovelock team, and they are very, very, very worried that we could have a runaway effect, and that by the time that permafrost in Siberia is gone, we're going to have a massive methane in the atmosphere, and it will not be possible to go back. So these are some examples of how with a simple paint and simple concrete you can make something, you know, even sometimes leaving what's there, like Marcel Duchamp that found objects and actually transformed them into art. You know, you find these elements which were used to make concrete and now they become gardens. And then you find these gardens which are in the shadow. I learned from Madhup yesterday, my friend Madhup, who we've been working together for the last 9 years in India, how you have to find the right plants even for the places where there's no light. And it is, you have to work with the landscape architects. We have to learn from them. This is a space created with bamboos. Simple bamboos create a space. No need for anything else. Less is more, like me said. Or less is a bore, like the postmodern said. Or like Bjarke Engels said, what was it? Always yes, or something like that. He's a genius, this guy. This is my team. This is what we do. This is my father, my brother, my partners. We still draw with the hand. We still believe that the hand is the way to go to the computer. And then we will see if machine learning is going to help us. We will see what we can do with robotics and artificial intelligence. But after all, it's people, it's a team, it's a human spirit working with nature that is going to save us. Thank you very much. Thank you, FOAID, for this beautiful occasion. And I'll see you all soon. Thank you very much.
you.